Hello, welcome again to Mulenge Speaks series. My friend, today will be speaking about the settlement. We have part 1 and part 2. In part 1, we're gonna start from where we stopped last time. If you remember very well, we established some facts, and here I'll only repeat 3. First, we said that there is no such clan or tribe as Tutsi or Hutu or Batwa. We say that those are social structures, social classification that were introduced by the Belgian and the German. Because if you remember, in Rwanda they have clan, or in those kingdom, like any other kingdom in Central Africa, we have clan, and they don't differentiate who is who in those clans, because the clan is supposed to have one ancestor. And so the people that we know today, or we call them today as Tutsi, Hutu, they all belong to one clan. There was no distinction. But during when the white people, we used to call them in that time the Western, when they came in, then to settle or to govern, they had to separate. And so they introduced the concept of Tutsi and Hutu. So, but we say that after following all the development of the history that we explain or we exposed here, we say that there is no such thing or such clan or tribe as Tutsi or Hutu. But we know that in Rwanda we have one tribe, which is called the Banyarwanda. In Burundi we have one tribe, which is called the Barundi. But in the DRC we have more than 300 tribes. But we are focusing here on the tribes that are in Eastern Congo. So that was the first point that we established. Then we also established that King Rwabugiri, who reigned between 1860 and 1895, never annexed the Bushi or the kingdoms of the Bushi, because the Bashi have different kingdoms. And so the whole territory of the Bashi was in conflict with Rwabugiri. He attacked them, he made some raid, but he never annexed that kingdom to its kingdom. And we also say that Rwabugiri, even though he attacked the territory of Bushi, he never attacked the kingdom of Bavira or the kingdom of Bafulero, less the kingdom of Babembe and the Barega, which is far in the far west and in the far south. So he never set his feet in the kingdom of Bavira or in the kingdom of Bafulero, but he attacked the kingdom that was at the north, which is closer at the frontier with the present province of Changugu. We also established the fact that the Banyarwanda that came into the eastern part of the DRC came as a result of internal and external factors, including the plunder or the raid of cattle, the labor or economic opportunities, internal conflict, and famine. So we're going to extend on these points today by explaining the settlement of these people now. Now we have established that they have now crossed, and we see that some scholars, they are using the word settling, or other they are using the word occupying. So we have to understand what it means, because when you settle or when you occupy, what does it mean? Does it mean the same thing to you or to me? Or did it mean something to the person who was doing the research? So we have to exploit that and explain to you what it means by trying to go into their mind. First, I'll try to use an example from free Wikipedia dictionary. I know it's not recommended for scholars or for education purpose because it's not reliable. But for this purpose here, I'll take a text and explain it. Then we'll go from there and see if what they meant or what the Banyarwanda are telling people to write is what it means to us and for you, my viewer. And so I'll read from the free English Wikipedia. It says, for example, here they are talking about the Banyarwanda. It says, a quote, but the first significant recorded influx of Banyarwanda into South Kivu is dated to the 1880s. Two reasons are given for their migration. The migrants were composed of Tutsi trying to avoid the increasing high taxes imposed by Mwami Rwabugiri of the Kingdom of Rwanda. Secondly, the group was fleeing the violent war of succession that erupted in 1895 after the death of Rwabugiri. They settled, this is the word, they settled above the Ruzizi plain over the Itombe plateau. And they continue. The Banyarwanda continued to arrive, particularly as labor migrants during the colonial period in Katanga between 1925 to 1930s. In 1924, the pastoralists received permission from colonial authority to occupy a high plateau further south. So we have two concepts here. One is settled, the other one occupy. So what does it mean to settle and to occupy? We try to refer to another dictionary. So it says, if we consider that the first word, settling, is from their own project, which could be possible that they passed through a geographic place from the Ruzizi River to the Itombe Plateau, situated at an altitude above 3,000 meters. So if they settled, so first we're going to consider the word settled. That means they left the Rwanda, they crossed the Ruzizi to go to the high plateau. So from Ruzizi to high plateau, there's a space, there's a geographical space which they crossed to go to that area and they settled. If, on the other hand, we agree that the colonial authority gave them the permission to occupy the high plateau, the same high plateau that we are talking about here, settling, we could also question or consider some royal decree laws. Remember here now, the Belgium or King Leopold II had some decree laws about how they're going to govern the Congo Free State. So we're going to go through those decree laws and see what they said in those decree laws, and then later we'll explain if the Banyarwanda, when they settled, when they occupy, were they occupying a empty land, or they were settling in empty land, or did they chase away the people that were living in those areas so that they could occupy the land? That will be in our next video. But here we're going to read some those decree laws. What do they say about the land that the Banyarwanda were coming in? We have, for example, the decree law of the 28th and 30th 1884, a law that made the King second the owner of the newly created Congo Free State. This law does not dissolve the tribal or customary laws and authority. It kept all the customary laws in place. And this is the Congo Free State we are talking about here. So when the Belgium gave authority to King Leopold II, the authority to own the Congo Free State, They did not dissolve, they did not dissolve, they did not destroy the customary laws or authority that were in place in Central or in the Congo Basin. B. The Decree Law of 1891, the Decree Law of June 1906, the Decree Law of May 1910, the Decree Law of November 1931 and December 1933. All these decrees, they recognized traditional authority as sovereign and its indigenous chief as political nature and native authority. Again, these 5 decree laws, as I said previously, they did not dissolve the authority, the traditional authority in the place, but they did recognize the sovereignty of indigenous chief as political native authorities. And here, if you want to get more detail, you can search Mr. Sourdian Jacques in his book Les Chefferies au Congo Belge, Paris 1940, at page 13. I repeat again, if you want to search this, you can look into Sourdian Jacques, Les Chefferies au Congo Belge, Paris 1940, page 13. C. The Decree of 1933, promulgated on April 1st, 1935, stated, I quote, "The chieftaincies are traditional groupings or localities organized on the basis of custom into an administrative conscription." And in French, it will be les chefferies sont les groupements traditionnels organisés sur base de la coutume circonscription administrative. Again, we can search Sourdian, page 15 to 29. D. The Decree of 1910 specially states on its Article 9 and 17. Article 9 says, I quote, "Custom will determine who are the chiefs, the sub-chiefs of the various administrative areas." End of quote. Article 17, I quote, "The chief and the sub-chief exercise their authority in the measure and manner fixed by indigenous customs, as long as it is not contrary to universal public order, nor contrary to legislative or regulatory rule, which are designed to substitute other rules to customary principles." E. We have another author that we're going to consider here. Jean-Marie de Pelchin stated on page 214 of his PhD paper, "From the Pre-Capitalism to Imperialism, a History of Social and Economic Formation in Eastern Zaire, between bracket Uvira Zone 1800 to 1965. This is his PhD that he presented in 1974. At page 214, I quote, "In DRC, colonizers were explicit about the strategy to be used with regard to the subjugation of the colonized. The goal and aims of the colonizer were best summarized in a 1900 report to the King of Belgium. Among other things, the report stated, faithful to its principle of acting progressively on the tribe without disrupting too much their customs and habits, the government has sought to use their own social and political organization in order to accustom them to the yoke of authority." I'm going to repeat this part. It's very important that you understand and you pay attention to what this 1900 report says when it was sent to the table of King of the Belgium. The report stated, I'm repeating here, I quote, "Faithful to its principle of acting progressively on the tribes without disrupting too much their customs and habit, the government has sought to use their own social and political organization in order to accustom them to the yoke of authority." So again and again, the term custom, native authority, a political organization, customs, chiefs are repeated in all these decree law. And why are they repeated? In other words, whether they settled or occupied, the Banyarwanda were entering or migrating or settling in the land already occupied by others. And many times with the express acceptance or authorization of the king of that particular place. So to say wherever they came to settle in the Bavira kingdom or the Bafuliru kingdom or the Babembe kingdom or the Barega kingdom, the Banyarwanda were all of them identified as Banyarwanda from Rwanda. And as we will see below, they came to the present Eastern Congo during King Rwabugiri of Rwanda, who we already know and see that he reigned between 1860 to 1895. So when you are told that the Banyarwanda came to the present Congo in the 1880s, what they're just telling you, what they are not telling you, they are not telling you that they came during the reign of King Rwabugiri, because the 1880 can mean 1881 to 1890. We have 10 years when they say 1880, so 80s, so we have 10 years. But we know that King Rwabugiri reigned from 1860 to 1895. So during his reign, that's when the people start crossing, and we gave the reason why they were crossing, because the internal conflict, and King Rwabugiri were taking out lands and distributing lands or cattle to other people who were willing to work with him or accepting his political mandate. And so when we are told that they came in the 1880s, it simply means that they were traveling or crossing into the western part of Rwanda or the eastern part of the present Republic of Democratic of Congo, when King Rwabugiri was still in power. And also, when they crossed, they came into lands that were occupied. They were politically and economically and militarily and socially, culturally well structured, well organized. Because they were already in place, because this kingdom and structure, political structure, were already in place. And based on the treaty that this kingdom or these chiefs signed with Henry Morton Stanley, the constitution of the DRC also recognized them, recognized these first settlers, these indigenous tribes, as what they call the Congolese of origin. So any other person who came after the signing of these treaties are not, and they were never considered before the independence of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and after the independence, they were never considered as Congolese of origin. We'll come to that. But for today, I wanted just to set plainly, I wanted to set here and to say that they crossed, they settled, they occupied. But these two words, they don't mean that they came and chased all the people that they found on the ground. They settled in land that were already occupied. When they say the colonial authority gave them the permission to occupy, it does not mean that the land that where they went to settle or to live were empty. They were already lands. And we see the decree law, the royal decree laws, what they say. They all maintain that they cannot disrupt or dissolve the customary laws or the customary authorities, because they want to make sure that they succeed in their mission of controlling and exploiting the resources of the newly created Congo Free State. So today I went here, and I want you to wait for the second part of this settlement episode, where we're going to explain if they could not chase away the population that they found in those regions. how did they cohabitate with them? And how did this population, these indigenous tribes, how did they call them? Did they call them Banyarwanda? Did they call them by another name? And then we're gonna consider 2 or 3 authors or scholars who went in the region before 1960, which is the independence of the DRC. When they entered in that area before the independence of DRC, how did they find those new population who came from Rwanda? How were they identified? How were they called? Were they called Banyarwanda before 1960 when they came to do their researches, including some of the authors or those scholars that are here in the United States? Did they, when they came to that area, how do they identify those populations that came, let's say those who came in the 1880s, even before, as the Banyarwanda claiming? In the 60s, how did they identify them? Were they still Banyarwanda, or they had already another name? Which language were they speaking? Who was their king? Which land were they occupying? What was the limitation? What were the limitations of their kingdom? Who were their neighbors? So we'll speak and we'll talk about that in the next. We'll talk about that in the next episode. But for now, I want you to like this video with the other previous one, make a comment, and try to share them. Thank you. So see you next time.